I appreciate what you're saying about like the reading that you've done and that you continue to do, and kind of how you see your world right now. Is that fair to say that you're seeing things differently because of the readings?
So I'll go back to what I had mentioned before, because you and I have had conversations about what it means to, not what it means, what's the long-term inquiry that you have undertaken as a man, as a husband, as a teacher, to kind of get to know yourself, that is less influenced by stuff outside of you, as opposed to just pausing and looking at the stuff you're carrying with you. And the turning point, sometimes you find just good ways of playing with words. You saying, and I've probably said it too, manning up doesn't feel like the right frame to kind of put together where I'm at in trying to understand myself as a man, a husband, a father, and the other intersections that are me. I find that it's more I'm manning inward. So I'm stalling stalling so that sometimes my thinking can actually catch up with my self-knowledge, because it's quite fascinating to me how quickly I can attach meaning to something, but that's like a forward kind of filter. It doesn't often take into account what's exactly in front of me. And yes, some of the reading, some of the stuff that I'm reading right now, about stoicism, and stuff that I'm reading right now, couple people, Kishimi and Koga, so they've done a couple books on, having courage to do things. Tattoos on the Heart, another piece. Man's Search for Meaning. Like I feel like I'm in a seeker resource gathering stage right now. Side note, as I hit my midlife, subtext, midlife crisis. But I think this is a good midlife crisis, because I was just saying to someone the other day, I'll cap this with this thought. I have I put my name in to get connected with a teacher candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And typically in special education, this doesn't happen. Like I don't remember. I think back in the beginning of my teaching days, we had two candidates working with us in the spec ed department, but they were actually there, I think, for a different subject. I think they were maybe with the history department, but they had spaces in their schedules. So both of them came to our spec ed department and worked with us in our classrooms, but they weren't specifically they were helping out in the classes. They weren't kind of a part of the behind the curtain stuff. So development of IEPs, looking at pedagogical design, universal design, all the other stuff that was kind of like in the backside. They were in helping us in the class, almost in a sort of like in a EA sort of position. So I've never actually encountered someone, a teacher, a spec ed teacher, having a teacher candidate in with them. So I was reflecting with a colleague who said, I told them this is happening. They're like, really? Cool. Never heard of that before. But I realized in talking about it that probably 10 years ago, or whatever it was, 12 years ago, I had the knowledge to work with a faculty member, but I don't think I had the space. I don't think I had it's a weird thing. I would say space or calm or presence of mind to contribute to their learning in a way that I think I do now. And again, I'll just bring it back to going to be 49 this year. And that means something different to everybody. But for me, it does kind of come down to, I feel like I now have space to be more authentic in that conversation around what does it mean to build community with a teacher candidate? What does it mean to contribute to their learning? What does it mean for them to contribute to mine? So, my head is up in those clouds right now. But yeah, manning inward.
Okay, so I'm glad you ended with manning inward because I do want to talk about manning up versus manning inward. I really appreciate that perspective because I've not heard of it before except this morning.
Dude, I literally like it's like I said, every once in a while you come across, words kind of honestly just it's the random, it's the improv, it's the riffing with words. They popped into my head, and I was like, yeah, that really does articulate. It articulates where my head's at.
I do want to say that I hope that your journey to find a teacher candidate to join you in your space is successful.
Mm-hmm.
I know that as soon as you started talking about it, it makes me think of the fringes, the outside space, the outside perimeter of education, not the core. So let me give you an example. I worked with a person once who, man, it's hard not to make a judgment. This person
Mm-hmm.
did not seem to be effective as a classroom teacher. And I'm just saying that based on what the person would tell me about their experience in the classroom. So when they would talk to me, I'd be like, oh, okay, that sounds like it's an issue. Do you want me to tell you, like, based on my experience, what I might do or would have done? They're like, yeah, that's why I'm telling you. And I'm like, okay. And so I would kind of talk to them about it, and they would look at me like they had never heard what I was talking about before, which led me to think, like, oh, how'd you get through teachers college then? But then I found out that this person, in their teachers college experience, none of their practicums were core practicums. None of their practicums were stand in a grade 3 classroom and teach to grade 3 students. All their practicums were on the fringes of education, some kind of outdoor ed experience, and then two others that sounded really amazing life experiences, but not in the classroom
Yep.
teaching experience. And so when I hear about the things you do in education, how you've been on the periphery of that circle many times, and you seem to keep wanting to go back there because I think it fuels who you are, and it gives you the purpose that you're looking for in life. That's what I believe about you. It might not be true, but that's how I see it.
I'd say that. I'd say that for sure. I'd say that for sure.
But you didn't start that way. My understanding of your educational experience is you had practicums where you did the traditional teaching in a relatively traditional classroom setting. And so I really believe I'm not for these periphery experiences at all. I think if a teacher candidate is going to go with you and be on this periphery of high school teaching of spec ed, I think it's great for one of their practicums, but I think they should have a solid foundation in what it looks like to teach traditionally in either high school or elementary classroom. And to me, that means tough luck. If you want to learn about IEPs and stuff at a deeper level, then you get into that after you have a foundation for what teaching looks like traditionally. This is my position. And it's so awesome that you would bring up what you just said, because as I sit here and talk to you, I am steadfast in my position. Both of my feet are planted and I'm not moving, because I've seen what it can do to people when you give them these amazing experiences. Like, who wouldn't want to learn how to teach an outdoor ed program in Calgary? Who wouldn't want that? That sounds amazing. But it's not going to help you when you get hired into a grade 4 classroom in an inner city school where you don't have a clue what you're doing. And then you're not serving yourself, you're not serving your students, you're not serving anybody around you or the parent community of the kids you're watching over, unless you're this like gifted teacher. And I have to tell you that some of this is coming from my insecurities as a teacher. When I was in teachers college, I sucked. And each one of my teacher advisors at the, I don't know what to call, my practice teaching teacher, all of them were concerned about me. I could tell. They're like, you don't belong here. We don't think this is for you. Or why are you doing it like that? Why aren't you doing like this? Like, I got the vibe from all of them that they didn't really like what I was putting down. Now, did it stop me? No. Did it hold any weight? Well, at the time it kind of did, because they had power over me and I didn't know what they were going to say in my evaluation, and were they going to pass me or were they not going to pass me, right? Like, and the other thing too was I didn't do well with getting parachuted into a class and taking over the class. I made it clear to all my practicum teachers, I'm not here to take over your class. I will do what I will do what's part of my program. So if I'm supposed to teach 100% in the third week I'm here, then I'll teach 100% in the third week I'm here. But I'm not walking and taking over like some of the other teacher candidates you get. And that was hard for me as like a young person to stand up to someone and say, you might want a puppet for 3 weeks. Sorry, I'm not going to be a puppet, but I will do what I'm supposed to do. So long story short, I was looking at this person. I was just shaking my head thinking, what a disservice it was to you to have these amazing teaching practicums in on the periphery, but now you don't know what to do standing in front of these kids. And that's a problem, because when it hits the fan in today's education system, my perspective, principals don't have time to hold your hand anymore and to lead you down that path. Other teachers can, but that's double the work for them. And then if you translate into this pandemic, I don't even see other teachers in my building unless I'm walking down the hall to the bathroom, or I'm walking out of the building, into the building, or going for duty. Other than that, I'm not sitting down with anybody saying, hey, let's talk numeracy for a minute. I'm not doing that right now. So I'm I thought of that when you said that. And I think that for a person to, it takes a gifted person, a natural educator, I would say, to be able to, like, if somebody was just going to do what you do for 3 practicums, I would say that's a problem. Unless then they're like Kramer and their whole life is lucky and they fall into a job just like yours when they get hired, and they stay in that job for their 30-year career and they turn it into an amazing experience. But for someone to be trained in a non-traditional way and then given a traditional job, and I'm talking about my own baggage here, that is a huge problem. I would have been in so much trouble if I didn't have my traditional teachers college experiences, practicums, and then throw me into a classroom. I would have been in big trouble. I probably would have flunked out. I would have lost my job, or I would have quit my job. I just wanted to throw that at you. Now I want to come back with manning inward versus manning up. When I use the term manning up, it's automatic. It probably has to do something with my limited vocabulary. I don't know what else to call it. But when you call it manning inward, it opens me up and I get it. And I feel good about that. And I feel good about my experiences learning about things and studying things outside of education. It's really filling my bucket now, because as I go through this new way of teaching, with some people I think are ignoring that there's a different way we're operating these days. I really feel like they're ignoring, like it's not happening. But for me, it's happening. Things are different because of COVID and the way I have to operate to keep people as safe as possible. I feel like my soul is being fed to lead me to act in a way that's relatively productive because of some of the things I've read outside of education and I've studied outside of education. So, the people I'm learning from are very like stereotypical men, or at least they appear to be that way. They appear to be strong. They appear to be healthy. They appear to stand up for what they believe. They appear to stand steadfast in their positions, and they're flexible to listen to other positions, but they come from a place that they value, and it gives them credibility when they speak and when they act. So for me, when I say manning up, that's what I'm connecting it to. But manning inward is such a powerful way of putting it, because it speaks to me. So all these things that I'm learning about and reading, and then connecting it into who I am as a teacher and who I am as a father, is forcing me to look inward and forcing me to acknowledge who I possibly am inside of me, because I'm still discovering who I am. And I want to tell you that part of my struggle these days is that I do feel lonely, but that shouldn't be a problem for me because I've always been alone.
But I
And
would say it depends on your goal.
well, here's the thing. Okay,
Yeah, it
I
depends
I,
on the goal. If the goal wasn't to be lonely, but
I
you
don't.
just were.
You have a lot to say about this, and I can't wait to shut up and let you jump in. But before I let you do that, because you've said a few things before we went on air that really make sense to me. But before I go there, I just want to say this is what I want to say. So I feel alone. I feel lonely, and I felt it before. I've been alone before, and I've been lonely before, and I've not liked it. I've come to learn to be okay with it, which has caused me problems in my family. Because as you and I were talking earlier, when you're a lone wolf, but you belong to a pack, this can cause friction, right? I get that. Because I'm feeling alone right now, I'm okay with it. But the part that's rubbing me is that when I look around me, other people don't seem to appear as though they're lonely or that they're alone. They don't have that going for them. And then I think to myself, well, then is there something wrong with me? That holds some space for a little bit, because once I'm like, I just think it, deal with it, and then go on to think whatever I am and whatever I'm feeling, this is who I am. So I'm just going to keep rolling along. So that feeling of, is there something wrong with me, doesn't impact me the way it did 20 years ago. What happens to me now is I own it. Yeah, maybe there is something wrong with me, and that's okay, because this is who I am. And I just keep rolling along. So it's not enough to paralyze me or to cause me mental damage the way it would have 20 years ago. What it does now is, when I own it and make it mine, it only helps fuel me to move forward. And that's a good thing. So no matter, and I don't even know what to call, I don't know what to even call what I'm feeling right now. There's a dissonance for sure. There is some anxiety for sure. But there's also, well, I'm just going to go to work and I'm just going to do the work. And I'm going to try to take in what's happening around me and help me move forward. But sometimes things that are around me aren't sinking in until I'm ready for them to sink in. And I've told myself that that's okay. So I'm done for now. And I want you to jump in about the being alone, the being lonely, because I think you've got some nuggets there.
I'll attribute I attribute all this to the resources that I said I read before. But when I think about loneliness and feeling alone, because the idea of doing that inner work, whatever your personality work, whatever it is that you're doing to sort of get a deeper understanding of who you are. One of the things I came across is that sometimes that can create a sense of isolation in the work, because you are necessarily removing other social elements from it in order to see who you are, and that can be a a spiritual process. It can be a materialistic process. It can be sort of like a philosophical or theoretical process, as far as, you know, the idea of kind of Maria Kondoing your mind, whatever that might look like. And in that process of kind of like getting more comfortable in just being you, I think that the the isolation that that might create, I think it's also important to think about um, exclusion in that kind of frame. So, and this came from, I think it comes from the courage to be disliked. The idea that you're lonely, that there's an element of loneliness where um, if you are excluded by your group, then that is a truer form of isolation and loneliness. Um, for you to be going in and doing inward work, but your community is actually not shunning you or pushing you away, that's not true loneliness. Because your community is still there for you. You're choosing a different path. And I think this is what, you know, if you're, this is the paradox of, let's say, middle-aged existential thinking, is that if you are, I'll say for myself, the fact that I have a family, and that I have a family, you know, I'm married, we have a life, we have a community, it gives you, or gives me, the privilege to think about, how am I going to improve myself? How am I going to do things to make myself a better person? And I can make these decisions in a way that I can be really risky and say, I'm going to go full intensity at this. And you know what? I only need one pair of pants, and I only need to sort of maybe eat once a day. And as far as communicating, I can start holding back words, really holding. So you kind of get this kind of withdrawal of other parts of your social self. But the truth of it is, if I were to go that intense and force myself into exclusion, then that would feel very, very different than me just saying to myself, I need to go for a 3-hour walk in order to sort of collect my thoughts, because I'll be welcomed back into the pack again. Like, there's a different safety zone there. So when I mentioned to you before about, when you had said before that, you know, you're feeling lonely, or that you're you have a sense of being a lone wolf, I would ask, well, what was the goal of that? Is your goal to actually be that you want to be lonely? Are you looking to sort of like, is it the sense of lonely that gives you that, the duality of actually feeling like you're an individual and doing the work that you need to do? As in, are those two things tied together? Again, I would put that you have some similar privileges that I do, as far as having a family, having a life, having the stability to sort of even say that you can self-improve away from the family. The fact that you have a family gives you the privilege to say, I can go self-improve away from the family. So I think that's just, when I think about loneliness, for me, it has to do with exclusion. So where you actually don't have opportunity to connect to communities, or the community that you would expect that you should be a part of doesn't want you anymore. And that can be a very different type of sort of loneliness, I think. And for me, would be a far more painful type of loneliness to experience.
And once again, you provide more thought fuel, right? So as you say that, it's funny, you ask the questions, I answer them in my mind. I've not been shunned from a group. I'm choosing to stay away from the group because I don't believe I have anything to give them. Like, it's a typical teacher thing where a bunch of teachers get together and everybody's got ideas and everybody wants to do everything. The reality is, at the end of the day, nothing gets done. Like, of the 15 ideas, maybe one is actioned one is actioned within all of them, or between all of them. And then, 3 or 4 people will action their own items, and then nobody else will action anything. They just go back to doing what they always do. And for me, it's like, I don't want to enter into that situation where you're going to give me 15 action items. It's going to make me feel worse than I already do, because I can't do the things that I had under my belt working like automatically, not working automatically anymore. Like um, there's a lot more manual adjustments being made now. Whereas before it was like I had a set of automatic items. They just occurred. And now it's like nothing seems automatic. Everything seems manual. And the more manual things you add, the harder it becomes to stay on top of everything. It's
Hmm.
literally gone to the point where, people are like, well, have you done this? And I'm like, no, I've not done that. That's not a priority. That's not a priority. I need to get some other things under my belt. And so I feel alone because these people keep actioning or make adding items to be actioned. And I'm looking at them thinking, why are you adding more things to action when we can't even action the minimum requirements? What am I missing? What am I missing? And short of starting an argument with my team, I just stay quiet and I just take in what I'm supposed to take in, and I read the Monday morning memo and I look at what's due and what admin would like from me, and then I do my best to give it to them. No fighting, no complaining. Like, as I talk to you right now, I'm not complaining. I'm simply stating the facts as I see them. I'm not complaining. This is, hey, I've been in education for 20 years, and even pre-pandemic, this was the case. Group of teachers get together. Everybody's got fantastic ideas. One idea might be adopted by everybody and they'll give it a try. And then there's a few people who action their own. I've been actioning my own ideas for years, right? And I have a blog where I document them. Other people don't, they look at me, they're like, he's crazy. We're not actioning that item. He can have that one. I'm like, that's cool. That's how I roll. That's what I'm going to do to feed my soul and fill my bucket. And that's how I'm going to teach my students. That's not happening this year. So yes, I'm part of the equation, but I'm also looking around wondering why I'm the only one feeling this way, for interest's sake, because like I told you, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change. I'm going to keep feeling what I feel. And I'm going to keep reflecting on what I feel. And I'm going to keep using it to to try to keep my mental health in a positive state, not in a negative one. So it's part of a big process for me. I just wonder these things. How come these people don't feel any of this? And if they do, why are they pretending that it doesn't exist? There's a number of questions I have. Now, to have said all that, there are people at work that have acknowledged to me that they feel the exact same way I do. And that's cool because I basically said to them, well, I'm here for you. So if you need something or if you want to talk or if you just want to sit here and just sit in the moment, I'm good. Because that's what I find myself doing all the time. I'm just sitting there. And I'm just like my days split into chunks, right? Like I get to school, it's the hardest time. First recess comes, I'm like, okay, we got through that. It's good. Now let's move on to the next thing. Usually after recess, it hits the fan because the kids are exhausted and I'm pushing them hard. Cognitively, I'm pushing them hard. I'm forcing them to think. I'm forcing them to work. They don't like it. So half an hour before lunch, they're gassed, totally gassed. And then I'm managing, right? I'm like, okay, well, I don't need explosions here and I don't need explosions there. So a softer side of me comes out. And we always do religion and family life and classroom meetings at that time because I can lighten the load there, right? We can talk reflective, we can talk religion, we can talk who we are, we can talk about God, and it seems to lighten everything. And that doesn't work in math and writing. But anyway, things start to go light, and then lunch comes, and I'm elated, right? Because I survived the morning. I get to eat. I get to sit with my friends and talk. I get to go outside and breathe in the air. Then I have my preparation time. So then I get back into work mode and I focus and I prep. Then I go back to the room and then I've got a period and I get through it. And then there's recess and I have duty. So I go outside and I get more air and I take my mask off. So I'm outside, I'm not wearing my mask. And it's awesome because kids come to me and I'm pointing at my face. I'm like, stay 2 meters away. I'm not wearing my mask. I want you to be safe. So I get to breathe in the air and then I go in and it's the last chunk of the day and we get through it and then I get to go home. And I tell you, if we could go back to last week's conversation uh, on the podcast about finding the little things that really make you happy. A little thing that's been making me happy is to get home and start cooking dinner, which was a pain in the rear end a year ago. Now it's almost like I kind of look forward to getting here, getting out the ingredients. My wife and I have a back and forth. My one son is debriefing from the day. My other son's doing the same type of thing. And in the middle of the chaos that is creating supper at this house, I'm finding that nugget. So everybody's looking at me like the world's exploding in the house. And I'm like, this explosion is my nugget. And then it goes back to the Shoppers Drug Mart story where I kept saying I have a podcast. Actually, I have to tell you, Chris, this has become a saying in my house now. So yeah, last night when we were eating dinner, we started arguing over something. And I just, in the middle of the argument, I said, I've got a podcast tonight. And everybody starts laughing. And they're like, no, you don't. I'm like, I know, but this is the phrase now. This is how I lighten the load. I have a podcast tonight. Let's get through this so I can get to my podcast. So it's become, and everybody laughed because everybody gets it. And so that nugget, my wife, she's not, I don't think she's seeing things the same way I am. So she's feeling the stress of making dinner. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? She's like, okay, can you cut this up or can you do that? I'm like, yeah. And as I'm doing it, I'm excited. They don't see that, but I'm like, this is awesome. I'm with my family and I'm doing something that a year ago was a pain in the rear end.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to talk about the whole day. I didn't want to give you, but it's just like, I kind of like these wonderings. I'm not going to mention this person's name, but somebody at work who I thought had it together has mentioned to me this week a couple of times, I'm lost, man. And I'm like, whoa, this is cool. They're like, why is this cool? I'm like, because you need to acknowledge that. You can't pretend everything's together because it's going to lead to damage. I know because I've lived it. And I do have, although my training is antiquated, I do have training in mental health counseling. So I do understand the basics of it. And I think my idea and like my train of thought is the deeper you bury that stuff, the worse it's going to be when it comes back up. Mm-hmm. And it's always at some point, something happens in your life, there's a shift and this luggage just comes to the top and you're like, uh-oh, what do I do with this now? I've been burying it for years, right? So I'm doing my best to try to maintain. I've got a lot down there in that basement. We've opened the door on this podcast a couple of times. I don't need to put more down there, right? There's already enough there. I don't need to put more down there. So there's a lot of things going on. I just wonder, I know we can't stand still and be crippled by the pandemic. I know that. Mm-hmm. But I am starting to see the cracks in the "you've got this" phrases. I see the cracks in the "you've got this." I see the cracks in just do what you can do, because I'm not buying it anymore. I'm not buying the "you got this" and I'm not buying the do the best you can. I'm not. Because as the system keeps turning and admin wants to see data on your marker student and they want to know the diagnostics you've done around literacy, you can't say, well, you can, but you can't say, oh, this is a really rough time right now. I can barely do my job. I didn't do any balanced literacy diagnostics. Sorry. Or, I'm 3 weeks late on giving you my marker students. That's because I don't have any this year, because I can barely do my job. So I can't give you marker students because I can't give them the focus that you're going to want me to give them. Nobody's going to say that out loud. And if they do, I'll be the first one to sit by their side and to say to them, I'm really sorry you're feeling this way. What can I do to help you? Because I really don't want you to lose your job when you admit you're not doing it. So what can I do to help you? You know,
Mm-hmm.
that means if that, and we can't combine classes, but if that means you need to come into your class during my planning time so I can kickstart your balanced literacy assessment and I can show you it's going to be okay. Let me show you a couple of things that might help you feel it's okay. I'm more than happy to do stuff like that. I'm happy to put my time into stuff like that right now because I don't want to see the people that might be feeling the same way as me. I don't want to see them sink because of it, because they don't know what to do or they don't want to do what they need to do. Whereas with me, I'm manning in because I've tried to man up for so many years and failed, that now manning in and taking in and making connections between all the awesome things I've read and people I've met and experiences I've had helps me prioritize in a way that I think I'm doing okay at surviving right now.
It's a funny thing, the whole just, I guess, the whole big picture of self-improvement and what it takes to activate the information that you've taken in. And I'm not going to simplify where my head's at by saying, because we're working through pandemic, that specifically is, you know, the gamma ray that's sort of triggering my hulking out on my new way of thinking. It's definitely a part of it. I'll say it's definitely a part of it. The amount of time that I've been able to give to thinking about what I do, how I do, why I do, when I do, has definitely been, privilege has allowed that for me as a teacher, as a white male, and all my privilege has sort of created space where I can look more deeply at who I am and sort of how I move through the world. And I don't know if I need to I don't need to sort of point to a source necessarily that says this is what's got me thinking differently. Like I can speak to it, but I don't I'm thinking forward. So now where I'm kind of at is just making sure that when I do notice something about myself, that I don't spend too much time trying to untangle how I got to that space. Because sometimes it is at the cost of asking myself, what am I going to do differently moving forward? So that's all. It's interesting to me that I feel like I've done kind of years of reading things that have been telling me to think differently, do things differently, try a different approach to connecting with people, find a different approach to seeing myself more clearly and becoming more comfortable in who I am. And I feel like it's just been in, like, let's say the last 7 or 8 months that some of that stuff, maybe it is the pandemic in some ways, that was the necessary boot camp to see what it is I'd actually learned about myself. I would say part of the process is definitely starting from 5 years ago when my dad died. That, I think, naturally started a process of, I won't say, sorry, not naturally, for me, it started a process of self-reflection as to who I am and who I am now without a dad, that identity sort of question. Who was I prior to that? A lot of little pieces have come out of that as well. But yeah, I think recent pandemic gymnastics has become the litmus for me to sort of test what have I actually taken in? What are the lessons that I've learned, and how accessible is that knowledge? As I kind of in some ways, I'm not even reaching back onto the shelf in memory to pull it out. It's just there. Like I find I'm just sort of thinking in that way. And you and I have talked about Goggins repeatedly. It's one thing to sort of witness his experiences and take it in as aspirational. It's an entirely different feel when life comes at you and your arm naturally goes up to defend yourself and you know how to counter it. So I find I'm in that space where the past few months, when I'm feeling some of the hard feels about school, about life, family, about self, there's defense T cells coming to my rescue to remind me of how I should be thinking in order to work through it. And I've just noticed that more as of recently, that I'm not having to go back and think, oh yeah, I read that thing in a book. It's just kind of there. So maybe this is I'm getting to finally reap some of the studies. And it's unfortunate, it's sad that the current metal that I'm being tested by is, COVID related. My question is then, when we get to a space where COVID is no longer the activator, if we get to that, what will it look like for me to generalize these skills? Because I think COVID notwithstanding, I want to keep these new frames of thinking. So I want to keep pursuing, as we've kind of said, manning inward to figure out the portability of these tools and how I spoke about the barium test, like just keeping it like they're in my system and it's not getting out. It's going to stay there. So when I go looking for it, I'll find it.
I think the very fact that you're telling me that the things you've read, the people you've met, the experiences you've had, how they're all coming to you now during this pandemic when you need to make those connections, or you need to rely on some kind of knowledge or understanding during this difficult time, how you don't have to reach for it, it's just popping in. Man, that tells me you've been on the right path for a very long time. And so just stay on the path. Just keep reading what you're reading and engaging in conversations that are now allowing you to stand. It's like your shield to pandemic. It's coming at you and you're like, oh, you just pick it up and you put it in front of you because you have all that experience, all that knowledge is right there for you to hold in front of you. You don't even have to go looking for it. I think this is a great example of how people who do these kinds of things, eventually your brain just makes the connections. The connections are just made. It might be easier for people like you and I and what I mean by that is like in our profession as educators, we're constantly teaching kids to make connections.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we're constantly living by what we're suggesting all the time. And I think it's amazing to see connections between things that people would think would have nothing to do with what we do as professionals. But we're not just professional educators. We're parents. We're dads. We're dads learning how to be dads without our dads. Like, it goes deep and it gets thick really fast. And I think that because the machine keeps turning, we just keep throwing things into it, and our brain does a wicked job of making connections really quick when we need them.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that's one of the reasons why I think I'm still able to go to work during this pandemic, during the way that things are at work. It's because I've built enough into me that I can be okay with not being okay. So watching these people, listening to these people talk about the way that they've processed through their life so far, if it's done anything, it's to give me the autonomy and the courage to just be me,
Mm-hmm.
whether my spouse likes it or not, or whether my boss likes it or not. And I say that it doesn't have to be like, I'm not saying that in a rigid way. I am a
That's not lone wolf. Then that's where it's right when you start to talk about that, like not being negative, not being bruised by other people sort of somehow suggesting or not understanding what you're doing. That's not the lone wolf popping up. I think this is just a good example of the duality of recognizing you want to be a part of a community, but you also want to contribute effectively to that community. And the way to effectively contribute to that community is to do the work for yourself, to figure yourself out. Because the risk could be, as you're saying, to sort of be impervious, let's say, to your small community or your family, and how they think about you and what they say to you. Like, that's not, you don't get to walk away from that. You just don't. You have to be affected by it. You have to take it in, and at the same time, you still have to grow. So,
Well, this was episode 7 of season 4.
mm-hmm.
I still am Roland Chidiak, and you still are Chris Clough. What did you draw? Oh, it's chasing squirrels dressed up as you and I. Those are stickers. You cheated today. You didn't draw everything on your own. Why do you have earrings? Oh, because you have earrings. Okay.
That's awesome. I love that you said that. Yeah.
I'm like, why is he wearing earrings? Oh, because he has them in real life.
Yeah, it was funny because as I was thinking about that, it took me a while. That's actually out of the whole thing. It is a very quick drawing today. It is, right. I'm augmenting. It's my decollage. I don't even know if that's the right word, but anyways, I will say out of the whole thing, me trying to decide where my earrings go. I don't know. Somewhere in the episode, if you play back the game tape, you might have seen me kind of take off my thing and just check. Oh yeah, it is in my left ear that I have 2, and in the right ear. Oh, I can't even do this right. In the right ear, I have the 1. And where do you put that on a squirrel? Let's be honest. Like, where do you put earrings on a squirrel's ear? So
that's awesome. I love the creativity there. Which, thank you for inspiring me for a creative project I was working on.
You're very welcome.
I think I'm just going to wrap up, and that's just, yeah. Anyway, I can explain more later, but I think I'm going to just finish what is not finished, and it's going to be unfinished to everybody who looks at it that doesn't delve deeper, but to me, it'll be finished.
Complete, yet unfinished.
Right. Complete, yet unfinished. It's art.
Yeah, it's art. I like that. Good stuff, buddy. Nice chatting with you.
Same here. Have a good one.
Take care.
See ya.